We are all geared up for the panel discussion today. I would now like to introduce and acknowledge the head of the Department of Commerce, Professor Amitabh Ghosh. Sir, I would request you to deliver the theme address for the today's program. Over to you, sir. Amitabh, sir.
Thank you, Professor Basu. Honorable Mr. Prabir Roy, Director of the Heritage Institution, Mr. Pradeep Agarwal, CEO of the Heritage Group, Dr. Pushpita Ranjan Bhattacharya, Principal of the Heritage College, Dr. Debashis Mazumdar, Head of the Department of Economics, esteemed speakers, guests, colleagues, and my dear students. Today we have two eminent academicians to speak on a subject which will have important effect on the short-term, medium-term, and long-term investment scenario. Conventional business risks are very often measurable and predictable. The unknown or unpredictable business risks are left out of the so-called fundamentals, means economic fundamentals. I'm not talking about the exogenous risks like the present pandemic. Moods, emotion, and psychology in markets determine the course of the unknown outcome. Markets are driven by buying and selling behavior of a powerfully influenced group of people. Emotions and feelings play a very important role in the market. Financial bubbles burst when prevailing emotions in the market shifts from greed to fear that happened during the financial meltdown of 2008. The transition happened very quickly. Sensing this transition is a vital part of risk management practices in business. For example, moods, emotions, and psychology in capital markets are driven by group thinking, which we sometimes call in economics herd behavior. There are many instances of people making large profits from activities that stem from high but concealed risks, which are hidden. Few of those enjoying such high profits are willing to put an end to the party. One way to avoid this kind of groupthink is by tracking a small number of key variables that can alert us about the looming danger. Well before the financial meltdown of 2008, columnist in Great Britain predicted the financial meltdown based on his analysis of what I call some key variables which can spot the dangers in the market, which can spot the concealed risk. So we do not know that unpredictable, unmeasurable business risks lying ahead. I'm not talking of COVID-19, that is exogenous, but largely exogenous. but risk which can be mitigated through policy variables, risk which can be mitigated by identifying the key variables. I will not speak much on this subject because I am not at all an expert on this subject. We have two very eminent people, eminent academicians who can speak much better than me. In fact, I can learn from them about the business risks faced by the Indian businesses, Indian corporates, small business, medium scale enterprises, particularly in the age of COVID, because COVID is not the only factor. Even before COVID, India's economic situation was not very good. Many fundamentals were not good. So I am confident that our two esteemed speakers will throw a light on the business risks that is lying ahead for us in India. I warmly welcome to our two speakers and hand over to the speakers to speak on this subject. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir, for the interesting and enlightening speech. Moving on to the main part of the program, I would now like to take the opportunity to introduce the moderator of the panel discussion, Professor Dr. Debashis Mazumdar. Dr. Debashis Mazumdar is now serving at the Heritage College, Kolkata, as a professor and head of the Department of Economics. He has been teaching economics both at the undergraduate and postgraduate levels for the last 35 years. He completed his postgraduate study in economics from Jadavpur University, Kolkata, MPhil in economics from University of Calcutta, and done his PhD from Rabindra Bharati University, Kolkata. He started his career as an assistant professor in economics in the Government College of South Tripura. During his service period, he has served at the Sudhir Ranjan Lahiri Mahavidyalaya, Nodia, and Bangobashi College, Kolkata. He has also been working as a visiting faculty at the PG Commerce section of Nawabaliganj Mahavidyalaya, Kolkata since 2013. He was also an empaneled research guide for many PhD scholars at Vidyasagar University, Mednipur. Many of his students, scholars, have been awarded PhD degree under his guidance. He has authored more than 35 textbooks in economics, some of which are being prescribed in the Calcutta University level also. He has contributed numerous articles in national and international journals and edited 2 conference volumes. His research areas consist of international trade, green marketing, rural development. We are ecstatic by your presence, sir. We have 2 honorable and distinguished speakers over here with us today. I would like to take a pride and privilege to welcome their gracious presence in our discussion today. We have with us Professor Dr. Debashis Sur and Dr. Soheli Ghose. Dr. Debashis Sur is a professor and former head of the Department of Commerce of the University of Burdwan. He did his MCom and awarded gold medalist in the year 1990. He was an MPhil topper in the 1983, and he has done his PhD in human resource accounting in 2002 from University of Burdwan. He obtained his BCom honors degree from the same university in 1988 and stood first in the first class. He has over 23 years of teaching experience, 10 years as professor and at the postgraduate level. He is a life member of Indian Accounting Association, Indian Commerce Association, International Business Studies Academia. He is also an invited member of various academic bodies in different central and state universities in India. He has worked as a member in the selection committee of different central and state universities as well as state agencies. Dr. Sur has acted as a member of the NAC peer team. He has also acted as an expert in NERO UGC for evaluating minor research projects in commerce and management. Professor Sur has so far contributed more than 100 papers in reputed professional and academic journals. He has 3 books to his credit. Under his supervision, 16 researchers, 21 scholars, and the number has been added now, have completed their PhD and MPhil degrees respectively. Dr. Sur has attended many seminars, conferences in India and abroad, and also acted as a chief research person in several national and international seminars. He is acting as a reviewer of Palgrave Macmillan Springer Journal of Accounting and Taxation and other renowned journals of business and commerce. Sir, we welcome you over here. Then we have with us Dr. Soheli Ghose. Dr. Soheli Ghose is the Dean of the Department of Commerce, Evening Section of the St. Xavier's College. She is also the coordinator of NetSet Guidance Center of St. Xavier's College Autonomous. She is a guest lecturer of University of Calcutta and have been awarded PhD in finance from the same university. She has also have an MPhil, MBA, MCom, and BA degrees with net qualification JRF. She is the PhD supervisor to many scholars, including me, under the University of Calcutta. She has over a decade experience in teaching and postgraduate and also in postgraduate students. She has been writing books and has so far written 8 books in financial markets, focusing on mutual funds, global financial crisis, investment strategies, and management. She has published over 50 scholarly research papers in numerous peer-reviewed journals.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, we just want to talk to her. That's the thing. We know she is educated.
She has many contributions in the form of chapters in book compilation. She has also been awarded the Outstanding Professor in Accounting and Finance at the National Leadership Award 2019, organized by Orbit Services Private Limited. She has been awarded Excellence in Management Research Award and also the Women Excellence Award in 2020, where she has been awarded Most Influential Women in Indian Academics. We welcome you, ma'am, to this panel discussion. Is there a technical difficulty? No. Well, I welcome you both over here. Now, without further delay, I will move this discussion over to Professor Debashis Mazumdar for the further deliberation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anjan. Good afternoon, everybody. So we are now at the final stage, and we are going to start within a few minutes the main discussion. So without any further delay, already Professor Ghose, Amitabh Ghose, has given the idea, the brief theme of today's discussion, and I hope that the business risks, particularly he has indicated that some of the risks we can estimate, but some of the risks are beyond our capacity. We cannot properly estimate, particularly panic among the people, particularly during the pandemic period. And if we review different articles, I was reviewing different articles as a journal of risk management, and I have seen that several research articles are there where they have emphasized on the panicking, perception. The perception, how do you perceive, for example, the risk that you perceive, and that perception is very difficult to quantify. And so for business houses, it is really difficult to manage this particular risk. And normally when we compare the risk during the time of financial turmoil during 2008-9 and the risk at present, where we observe due to this pandemic a wave of this depression, business activities are hampered. There are obstacles to business activities in different parts of the world, and the global supply chain has broken. And due to this break in the supply chain, different segments of business activities in different parts of the world, including India. They have been affected, and it is really a moot question before the business houses, the business world, and how to tackle this particular risk. So I believe that in our today's discussion, the learned speakers will throw new lights upon this particular aspect, and I would now request Professor Debashis Sur to start the discussion. So, and I believe that so far as time is concerned, you will get about, say, 35 minutes to complete your part, and then Soheli Ghose, and then we shall move over to interactive session. So I request Professor Sur to start.
Thank you, Professor Mazumdar. Good afternoon to everyone present here. Professor, Honorable Principal, Professor Pushpita Ranjan Bhattacharya, Honorable Principal, the Heritage College, Professor Amitabh Ghosh, Head, Department of Commerce of the Heritage College, respected Dr. Soheli Ghose, Dean, Department of Commerce, Xavier College, Kolkata, respected Professor Debashis Mazumdar, Head, Department of Economics of the Heritage College, my beloved Professor Dipanjan Basu, and other respected professors present here, ladies and gentlemen, and my beloved students. Now we have assembled here to make some discussion on the issue associated with risk factor in Indian businesses during this pandemic situation. In fact, we all can know that COVID-19 was first found in India in the last week of January 2020. That means we have already spent a period of more than 8 months. Lockdown started in India on 25th March 2020. We have already completed 4th phase of lockdown, and now we are in the semi-lockdown phase. So there has been a tremendous impact of COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown on the Indian economy as well as the world economy. In this context, we can mention some information. We all know that the United States of America is the most powerful country in the world from the economic point of view. In fact, USA is financially the strongest country in the world. In USA, in the last April, that means in April 2020, 15 to 17% employees have lost their job. More than 2 crore people have become jobless in the month of April 2020 in USA. Now, if we consider the India's situation, we find that the India's picture is more alarming. If we go through the report published by the CMI, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, we find that the unemployment rate in India, which was less than 7% in the mid-March 2020, became more than 27%, 27.11% in the first week of May. It was 29% in the urban areas and 26% in the rural areas. However, unemployment rate has declined slightly in the last week of May. As per the report published by the CMI on May 27, 2020, the unemployment rate in India was about 24%. It was 26.5% in the urban areas and 22.9% in the rural areas. During this lockdown period, about 14 crore people have lost their job. They have become jobless during this lockdown period. So it has a severe impact on Indian business sector. However, we can say that the unemployment rate in India has declined significantly in the month of July 2020. As per the report published by the CMI in the month of July 2020, the unemployment rate in India was 7.43%. In urban areas, it was 9.15%, and in rural areas, it was 6.66%. However, we can say that the data provided by the CMI may not reflect the true picture of the Indian business environment, Indian business world. In this context, we can mention one survey, one study conducted by the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. FICCI has conducted one study on the basis of 380 big companies across the sectors. Now let us consider the major findings of the study. Number one, this study reveals that there has been a tremendous uncertainty in the Indian business environment during this pandemic situation. COVID-19 is having deep impact on Indian businesses. Number two, this study also reveals that 72% of the sample companies have been placed in the category of very high level of risk. Another important outcome of this study is that 70% of the sample companies are expecting a degrowth, that means a negative growth in their sales turnover during the financial year 2020-21. So the size of business or scale of operation has gone down significantly during this current financial year. In this context, we can mention the names of some significant companies like L&T, Tata Motors, Ultratech Cement, and many companies belonging to the FMCG sectors, including Unilever Hindustan Lever, Nirma, even Maharatna Central Public Sector Enterprise Well, all have downsized their business operations in the current financial year. Another significant outcome of this study is that 61% of the sample companies have postponed their expansion program for a period of 6 months to 12 months, and 33% of the sample companies have postponed their expansion program for a period of more than 12 months. Another notable outcome of this study is that 60% of the sample companies have postponed their fundraising plan for a period of 6 months to 12 months, and 25% of the sample companies have postponed their fundraising plan for a period of more than 1 year. So on the basis of the outcomes derived from these studies, it can be said that India's business sector has been facing tremendous challenges emanated from COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. Now let us consider some additional information in this respect. More than 6,600 Indian companies have legal linkages with companies in countries with a large number of confirmed COVID-19 cases. That means more than 6,600 Indian companies have legal linkages with those foreign companies which are situated in such countries where the outbreak of COVID-19 is severe. In this context, we can cite the example of China. We all know that there is a very close association between India and China in respect of international trade. And we also know that China is the world's largest exporter. It accounts for about 13% of the world exports. And China is the second largest importer in the world. It accounts for about 11% of the world's imports. China accounts for about 13% of the world exports. And out of this 13%, 5% comes to India. More specifically, we can say that, in fact, we can say that China contributes about 14% of the India's total imports. More specifically, we can mention that 45% of the India's total electronics imports come from China. 1/3, that means 33% of the India's total machinery imports come from China. 40% of the India's total organic chemical imports come from China. In case of fertilizer and automotive parts, this is 25%. 70% of the India's total pharmaceutical ingredients imports come from China. And in case of mobile phone, this is 90%. So these industries have been highly affected by COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. We all know that large-scale industries and MSME sectors are interdependent and interrelated. In fact, large-scale industries largely depend on the supply made by the MSME sector, and MSME sector largely depends on the demand of the large-scale industries. So they are interrelated and interdependent. It is to be noted that MSME sector contributes about 31% of the India's GDP, and MSME sector generally follows a growth rate of at least 10% per annum. Another important point regarding India's MSME sector is that 45% of the India's total exports are contributed by MSME sector. So MSME sector plays a very vital role in Indian business world. Due to this COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown, both large-scale industries and MSME sectors have been severely affected. Now, what is happening in Indian businesses in respect of risk? We all know that in today's challenging and competitive environment, efficient management of risk is an integral component of the overall corporate strategy to create shareholders' value. In running the business, a company is exposed to various risks from within or outside the company. The total risk associated with a company can be broadly divided into two components. One is business risk and the other is financial risk. And business risk has three basic components: economy risk, industry risk, and company risk. That means firm-specific risk. Economy risk depends on economy-specific factors, and these economy-specific factors have been highly affected during this abnormal situation. Inflation has gone up significantly. If we consider the inflation data, we find that the average inflation rate between February 2020 and February 2019 was 3.6%. In March, it was 4.2%. In April, it was 4.9%. In May, it was 5.7%. In June, it was 6.3%. And in July, it was 6.93%. So we can say that with the passage of time, inflation has gone up significantly. Similarly, exchange rates have widely fluctuated. Even restrictive regulations have changed rapidly during this pandemic situation. The Government of India, RBI, SEBI, even the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India have made necessary changes in respect of their rules and regulations during this abnormal situation. As a result, there has been a clear upward trend in the degree of economy risk associated with the Indian businesses during this abnormal situation. Similarly, industries depends on industry-specific factors which have also changed rapidly with the passage of time during this pandemic situation. So industry risk has increased significantly during this abnormal situation. Now, if we consider company risk, we find almost the same picture. Increase in both economy risk and industry risk has resulted in increase in company risk or fund-specific risk associated with the Indian business enterprises during this abnormal situation. Because we all know that firm-specific risk is directly influenced by firm-specific factors, but it is indirectly influenced by certain macroeconomic variables. That means economy-specific factors and industry-specific factors. That's why increase in economy risk as well as industry risk has resulted in increase in firm-specific risk associated with the Indian business enterprises in the present day situation. We all can say that the genesis of company risk, that means firm-specific risk, lies in instability in the company's one or more fronts, important of which are instability in cost behavior pattern, instability in revenue generating capability using capital base, and instability in short-term debt paying capability. These inherent weaknesses lead to cost structure risk, capital productivity risk, and liquidity risk. Now, if we consider cost structure risk, we find that there has been a tremendous volatility in the costs of material, labor, and other items used in business operations. As a result, cost structure risk has increased significantly during this pandemic situation. Now, if we consider capital productivity risk, we find that there has been a significant increase in instability in revenue generating capability of business firms. Obviously, capital productivity risk has stepped up notably during this abnormal situation. Now, if we consider liquidity risk, we find almost the same picture. Rapid fall in demand, instability in cost of inputs, as well as price of output, increase in instability in revenue generating capability, all have resulted in increase in instability in short-term debt paying capability. As a result, the liquidity risk associated with the Indian business enterprises has increased significantly in the present day situation. So all the components of firm-specific risk have increased significantly in the present day situation. Economy risk and industry risk have also stepped up notably. As a result, there has been a clear upward trend in the degree of business risk associated with the Indian business enterprises during this abnormal situation. Now, if we consider financial risk, we find the same picture, because financial risk depends not only on the sources which have been used for the creation of pool of funds, but also fluctuations in foreign exchange rates as well as interest rates. In the present day situation, we find that wide fluctuations in foreign exchange rates and interest rates have taken place. As a result, financial risk associated with the Indian business enterprises has increased significantly in the present day situation. We all can say that theoretically there should be a high degree of negative relationship between business risk and financial risk. A company having high business risk should maintain low financial risk in order to keep its total risk within a reasonable limit. So there should be a high degree of negative relationship between business risk and financial risk. However, the situation arising out of COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown does not conform to the theoretical argument. It mismatches with the theoretical argument, because both business risk and financial risk associated with the Indian business enterprises have increased significantly in the present day situation. As a result, we can say that there has been a clear upward trend in the degree of total risk associated with the Indian business enterprises. Now, what is the way out? What are the measures that are to be adopted in order to combat this situation, in order to mitigate the risk associated with the Indian business enterprises? We can say that we are not in a position to make final conclusion. We are not in a position to make final prescription. Even we are not in a position to identify the exact measures which are to be adopted in order to combat this situation, in order to mitigate the risk associated with the Indian business enterprises. But now we have to mention certain points, certain measures which may be adopted. The first one is public distribution system should be efficiently managed. Now, question may arise whether there is any relationship between public distribution system and Indian businesses. I must say that yes, there is a positive relationship between the strength of public distribution system and the success of Indian businesses, especially in the present day situation. Because we all can say that if public distribution system is properly run, then only people will get adequate amount of food grains and other essential commodities. And if it happens, then people will be in a position to spend some money for acquisition of non-essential commodities also. As a result, consumption expenditure will go up. That means demand will go up. So on the basis of this, it can be said that there is a positive relationship between the strength of public distribution system and the success of Indian businesses. However, public distribution system in India is not running properly due to certain causes. In this context, we can mention at least 2 points. The first one is lack of information. Government does not have adequate information about the needs of the people, especially people living in the rural areas, people living in the remote villages. As a result, proper distribution of essential commodities cannot be made. So unequal distribution of essential commodities will arise. Secondly, high level of corruption is involved in the public distribution system in India because huge amount of fund is involved in the public distribution system in India. In this context, we can mention at least 2 points. The first one is that about 80 crore people are the beneficiaries of public distribution system in India. That means 58% of the total population in India depend on the public distribution system. Secondly, for the current financial year, that means the financial year 2020-21, fund allocated by the government for providing food subsidy is rupees 1,15,570 crore, which is about 3.8% of the total estimated expenditure as per the budget estimates relating to the fiscal year 2020-21. So huge amount of fund is involved in the public distribution system. That's why high level of corruption is involved in the public distribution system. So if we minimize this odds, that means if we remove this problem, then only we can say the public distribution system can be effectively run. Public distribution system can be efficiently managed. The second one is we can mention the prescription of renowned economist, Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay. According to the prescription of Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay, print currency notes and distribute these currency notes among people without considering the issues associated with inflation. It has already been done in USA and Japan. According to his argument, if people get money, consumption expenditure will go up. As a result, real sector growth rate will increase, employment will step up, income will increase, and ultimately demand will go up. So the prescription of Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay can be adopted in order to combat this situation. In this context, we can mention the names of some significant personalities, some eminent personalities also. We can mention the name of famous economist, Professor Raghuram Rajan, ex-governor of RBI. We can also mention a famous Marxist economist, Professor Prabhat Pattanaik of JNU. Even we can mention the name of CII President, Mr. Uday Kotak. All have made the same recommendations. So we can say that eminent personalities from different corners, eminent personalities from different fields, even we can say that the eminent personalities belonging to the different ideologies have made the same recommendations. They have given the same opinion as prescribed by Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay. So the prescription of Professor Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay can be implemented in order to combat this situation arising out of COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdown. However, it has a negative side also. Presently, the confidence level of people in India has gone down significantly because people are not in a position to predict what will happen in near future. That's why their confidence level has gone down significantly. In this context, we can mention one survey conducted by RBI in the month of May 2020. As per the RBI survey report, the future expectation index, which measures the consumer's perception of the economy, was 97.9. In fact, a score below 100 indicates consumers' pessimism. As the future expectation index in India is 97.9, which is below 100, it indicates that the consumers are pessimist. They are not optimist. Their confidence level has gone down significantly. So if the confidence level does not improve, we can say that people will not spend money for their present consumption. In that case, people will save money for their future consumption. And if it happens, then we can say that money will not come back to the market. That means the consumption expenditure will not go up and ultimately demand will not go up. So this is the negative side of the prescription of Professor Avijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay. So during the last 20 or 25 minutes, we have been mentioning only the odds, only the negative points. Now, we have to mention one positive side, one hope. So let us consider one silver lining behind the corona cloud. We have already mentioned that China is the largest exporter in the world. It accounts for about 13% of the world export. And China is the second largest importer in the world. It accounts for about 11% of the world's imports. So China plays a very vital role in international market, in international business. Now it is expected that China will not be able to retain its shares in the international market in near future due to this COVID-19 outbreak. Because we all can remember that COVID-19 was first reported in China on 17th November 2019. So it has a severe negative impact on Chinese economy. Even from the perception of the people, we can say that it has a negative impact on Chinese economy. In fact, we can say that the first outbreak of COVID-19 in China has definitely hampered the reputation and goodwill of China in the world market. And as a result, China may not be able to retain its shares in the international market in near future. And if it happens, that means if China is not able to retain its shares in the international market, then foreign capital, we can say that the foreign capital may come to India. Why? Because India enjoys certain competitive advantages. India enjoys certain benefits. In this context, we can mention at least 3 points. The first one is that India enjoys demographic advantages. About 64% of the total people in India belong to the age group of 20 to 35 years. So India has sufficient cheap labor force. Secondly, India has adequate number of skilled IT personnel. Thirdly, political stability in India is much higher as compared to the other neighboring countries. In this context, we can also mention the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking. As per the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking, India captured 142nd rank in the year 2014 out of 190 countries in the world. In 2015, India's rank was 131. In both 2016 and 17, India's rank was 130. In 2018, India made a significant improvement in its status and reached 77th rank. In October 2019, India's rank was 63. So we can say that with the passage of time, India has been improving its status in respect of World Bank's ease of doing business ranking. So on the basis of this, it can be said that foreign capital may come to India. And if foreign capital comes to India, then it is expected that India's business sector will do better in near future. More specifically, we can say that foreign direct investment, FDI, will not only augment capital formation, but also act as a vehicle for technology upgradation, skill development, export promotion, job creation, and even the improvement of overall competitiveness of the economy. So we can say that this is a huge opportunity for India in the post-COVID era. And if we grab this opportunity, then we can say that in future, at least a considerable number of years would belong to India at the global stage. So we can say that it is expected that the India's business sector will do better in near future. So this is our expectation, this is our anticipation. However, we all know that success of any prediction or any projection depends on certain factors. So today, before concluding my discussion, I have to mention one very important factor, one vital factor. So in this context, we can mention the name of famous social and political theorist, Professor John Elster, Professor of Political Science, Columbia University. And we must mention his classic entitled The Cement of Society, a Study of Social Order. According to his famous book, any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved if proper cooperation is there. That means if proper cooperation is present in the economy, then we can say that any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved. In this context, we can also mention the name of famous British-born Marxist economic geographer and distinguished professor of anthropology and geography at the City University of New York, Professor David Harvey. Professor David Harvey has given emphasis on collective efforts and collective response. He has given emphasis on collective efforts and collective response. He has published one article in Jacobin. Jacobin is a very famous magazine in USA. He has published one article on 3rd June 2020 in Jacobin, and in his article he has given emphasis on collective efforts and collective response. And we all know that collective efforts and collective response and cooperations are interdependent and interrelated. So again, we can say that if proper cooperation is present in the economy, then any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved. However, there are certain factors which may hamper, which may hurt the strength of cooperation. In this context, we can mention at least 3 points. The first one is personal ego. This is associated with human behavior. Personal ego, that means personal ego associated with the stakeholders. It is associated with the human behavior. So if negative ego takes place, that means if negative ego of the stakeholders takes place, strength of cooperation goes down. Secondly, irregularities and corruptions. If irregularities and corruptions arise, personal interest takes place. As a result, strength of cooperation goes down. And third one is irrationalities. This is also associated with human behavior. So if we are not rational enough, if we are irrational, strength of cooperation goes down. So if we minimize the negative impact of these factors, then only strength of cooperation will go up. So if strength of cooperation restores, if strength of cooperation enhances, then any prediction or any projection can be successfully achieved. And if it happens, then we can say that it is expected that India's business sector will do better in near future. And with this hope, I'm concluding my discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you. I must convey my heartfelt thanks and sincere regards to Professor Pushpita Ranjan Bhattacharya, Honorable Principal of the Heritage College, and his associates who have given me an opportunity to act as resource person in this panel discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Sur, for your enlightening speech, the lecture, where you have hinted upon different aspects of business risk, giving examples from India particularly, and you have shown the relationship between the MSME sector and the large-scale sector interdependence, and the components of the different components of business risk and financial risk, and what are the present scenario that Indian business houses they face, and why there is an instability, what are the reasons for instability, what are the reasons for financial risk. And you have rightly mentioned that if the government policy regarding the public distribution system is much more stronger in a particular country, then it can lead to say higher consumer expenditure, and through multiplier impact that can also lead to higher demand for different consumer items. Okay, that you have hinted upon, and you have also explained the some of the negative aspects of this particular risk, confidence level of Indian people, then future expectation index. You have ended upon the RBI, this RBI survey in May 20, where the consumers are pessimistic. I just want to add one thing. That report also indicates that mainly our middle income and low income group, they are now taking less loan from the bank. So if they take loan, say smaller amount of loan, then their spending, total spending will also be less. So I want to add that thing with your speech. And you have also properly indicated some of the silver lining, because there may be chances of relocation of investment from China to other countries. But I personally feel that if we want to relocate, that will take some time for the preparation of infrastructural status in India. For example, in China, their expenditure on infrastructure, and in India, you just cannot compare. In Indian economy, the spending as a percentage of GDP in infrastructure is much lower compared to that of China. Okay, and you have also indicated the political stability as a good sign. But sir, recently BTI index, it shows that the governance and the democracy in India is a defective democracy. Okay, so in case of China, it is hard autocracy, but in case of India, it is defective democracy. You do not have the right to speech. Whenever you speak something against the government, you are anti-national. So this is there, and I want additional one thing in your speech, that is, you have rightly indicated the ease of doing business in some report of World Bank. But recently, World Bank has dismissed Indian, some of the data that India supplied to World Bank, and so this type of this is really very unfortunate even on the part of any particular government if you deliberately misrepresent the fact, and that is one of the negative aspect of I think this democratic environment in a society. And you have rightly pointed out that that we must move together. Our solidarity must be maintained, and only then the business world and the common world, because the business world is much smaller than the common people. So there is a large interaction between interdependence between the common people and the business class. And sir, the recent some study, it has indicated that the perceived this apprehension regarding COVID, this perceived risk among the people, it also depends upon the government policy. For example, in case of Spain, in case of some other country, Australia, it's a faith of the people upon the government. If they have more faith on the government, then their risk perception is lower. So here you are correct, that if the government has a proper policy, then only the people with the risk perception will be lower. So we can conclude that this discussion indicates that in case of India also, there is government has a bigger role to play. For example, just like Keynesian economics, we must pump in money, as you have pointed out, as suggested by Abhijit Binayak Bandyopadhyay. Thank you very much, sir, for your erudite lecture. We are really enlightened. And now I would request the second panelist, Dr. Soheli Ghose, to just start her lecture. Soheli, shuru karo.
Good afternoon. Respected Dr. Pushpita Ranjan Bhattacharya, Honorable Principal, the Heritage College, Professor Amitav Ghosh, Professor and Head, Department of Commerce, the Heritage College. Professor Dr. Debashis Mazumdar, Professor and Head, Department of Commerce, the Heritage College. Department of Economics, the Heritage College. Professor Dr. Debashis Sur, Professor and Head, Department of Commerce, Burdwan University. Respected professors, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I would like to thank the principal and the entire set of committee members for giving me this opportunity to speak in this extremely enlightened panel. And as Sir has already spoken, it's very difficult to follow Debashis Sir's erudite speech and whatever deliberations he has made, but I will still try to focus on some areas, and my area being capital markets, I will try to focus on that. Now, before that, I have a short, along with the speech, I have a short presentation, so I will go ahead with my presentation now. Professor Dipanjan Basu, could you please tell me whether the screen is visible? I'm just putting up.
You just go to the present now?
I know, I'm doing the presentation, so I have presented my screen. It's a PowerPoint presentation. Is it visible?
Yes, it's coming.
Okay, thank you so much.
No, it's not visible still now. Or would it like to dekho to?
It is visible.
It's visible.
Yes, yes, visible.
Okay, it's now visible.
It is visible, ma'am. Visible.
Okay, so should I go ahead with it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I would like to begin with a quote. In a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity. John F. Kennedy. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Winston Churchill. Now we already know the world has witnessed many crises before, the last one being the global recession of 2008. But this present crisis, which is because of this coronavirus, is very, very different from what we have seen or witnessed before. And we have to be very mindful because the situation is often compared to catching a falling knife. And as already mentioned by Dr. Sur, the current measures, if not done or explained in a proper manner, are extremely damaging to the global economy and especially our Indian economy. So, what was the situation? The 2020 market crash occurred as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Many people are saying that this is only because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Experts say that. And the reason being the rising fears in the global economic shutdown, because this has led to ultimately the global market crash. However, like many other experts, I would like to mention that coronavirus or the COVID-19 pandemic has been an accelerant rather than a sole core reason behind this global market crash. So why do I say this? Or why do some of the other experts say this? I'm going back a little. During 2019, the IMF reported that the world economy was already going through a synchronized slowdown. Synchronized, I would say, because one after the other, like a domino effect, the economies were falling like a pack of cards. And obviously, we already know it had entered into its lowest phase during the 2007-8 crisis. But cracks were already appearing in every single sector of the global market, especially in the consumer market, which Dr. Sur had already mentioned, that the consumer, the amount of expenditure the consumer made was already coming down. And manufacturing activity was hit very badly. And we have already seen this in India. I will come to that in just a while. Now, IMF had blamed that the heightened trade and geopolitical tensions were one of the reasons which were fueling this global slowdown. Brexit, then the China-United States trade war, and so many other crises which followed one after the other were one of the primary reasons for the slowdown in 2019. Of course, liquidity issues were there, as already explained by Dr. Sur in a very wide line, so I will not get into that liquidity issue because Sir has already explained that. So my point here is, we are all looking at a structure where everyone is kind of saying that the coronavirus is one of the major reasons of this global stock market crash. But then the problem started long back, and the core area of concerns was something very, very widely different than only the concept of coronavirus. So with that, I would like to describe two elements of risk here. Since, as I said, my discussion here will be mainly related to the capital markets, I would like to discuss few aspects of risk. Now, we already know the risk of business would lie where profits are affected adversely. And as Sir has explained, with that business risk, there are so many intermittent risks which are involved that those are very clearly related with sales volume, sales price, purchase price, administrative transportation expenses, and many other risk factors. So these are the business risks which have already been discussed before. Now, any amount of uncertainty associated with the risk elements will lead to a mismatch in cash flow, which will lead to a net decrease in the cash flow of any business or investment. And the moment there is this uncertainty, volatility, variation in the net cash flow, there is a problem of risk. If it is favorable, good. Speculations will be very, very highly taken up. But even when it is unfavorable, the speculation itself becomes risky. And most importantly, if the risk is extremely unfavorable, as we are seeing right now, the overall impact will have a major downward trend, not only on the business, the market, the consumption, the entire global economy. So based on that, I'll take a very simple example. Supposing a trader engages in a trading of a commodity, where demand for prices fluctuates substantially over a short period of time. Now, we already know if everything moves favorably, the trader can earn very high profits. So a certain amount of volatility is always preferred, it is welcomed, it is considered good, because until and unless there is volatility, we would actually not be able to grow in a certain direction. However, if this entire thing becomes negative, if the variability in net cash flow is high, and it becomes an adverse movement or a downward movement, obviously we know that the profits will be affected very badly. But the variability, if the net variability is less, then it's a lesser risky business, then obviously the upside movement as well as the downside risk will be low. I will talk about the downside risk a little later when we discuss the market issues. And right now I just wanted to discuss the basic structure of market risk. Again, let's take another example. Say a retired person has invested 1 lakh rupees at 6.5 payable half yearly RBI. Now that has maturity of 5 years. Now the gentleman would receive interest for this every half year into 50 approximately, and would receive back a principal after maturity. So this is almost a steady income flow, a fixed income flow, and almost zero risk. Now returns are also low, and the risk is also low. But then these conceptions of risk have changed widely over the last few years, and presently we are coming across various aspects or impacts of risk which were previously unknown. Because as I've already said, that all the crises, financial crises that we have seen before, were not even close to what we are seeing now. So thereby, we need to analyze this risk in a different angle. This we already know in the financial sector. What are the main types of risk that any large finance company or any company in general would face? The first and foremost problem, there are many, many problems. I have taken up only few aspects of those risks. I would say a backward financial system. In India, I wouldn't say our financial system is backward, but it is still not as developed as it could have been. Now, by financial system, I do not only mean the stock markets. I mean the reach of finance to each and every sector of the society. While we see a huge amount of development in the urban, semi-urban sector, the rural India still does not have the access to the basic financial system. Yes, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana has created a lot of access, but still there are areas where the finance system has not been able to reach. A paucity of funds. This is the major problem which has hit the global situation right now. But in India, we were already feeling this even before the COVID pandemic actually increased. So paucity of funds, obviously, whenever there is scarcity, this will lead to a huge amount of risk. And the moment there is a paucity of fund, the distribution of this fund into different either priority sector lending or in different areas of economic development becomes critical. As Dr. Mazumdar said right now, that in India, the amount of spending that we have in proportion to GDP and infrastructure is meager in terms of that of China. So how are we going to spend the funds? Even the limited funds that we have will actually lead to either a risk factor or a positive impact of a scarcity allocation. Unsatisfactory infrastructure. This is not only in India, this is crippling the world at large because these problems are interlinked with various other situations, and I will come to that in a while. Lack of adequate capital formation. In our country, especially just before the pandemic hit us full throttle, people were already reducing their investment. And as Sir said, both Dr. Sur as well as Dr. Mazumdar, that the amount of savings have increased in the forms of people are parking their funds in banks, but they're not taking loans, they're not investing. So until and unless there is appropriate investment by people in necessary areas, the wealth creation, capital formation, credit creation, everything will be having a very, very negative and adverse impact. And a major problem which I would like to highlight, especially in India, is the difficulties of small industries. Yes, there are many types of yojanas. There are many types of different policies which have been created for the development of small industries. But even before the pandemic hit us, this distribution of capital, the management of funds, the appropriate development of these small industries were not happening to the extent as desired. This increased triple, quadruple times when the pandemic hit us and all the production stopped, the supply chain logistics were turned completely over, and this led to a lot of problems which we will discuss one by one. There are many other risks which are involved in any financial sector, as I said. I am just discussing a few because of the paucity of time. I guess I would have around 25 minutes to speak. So therefore, I will just touch upon a few of these things. So, if I go back a little, as I said, the scenario till December 2019, as per the OECD report, I've mentioned the sources here as well, so if anyone wants to discuss anything further or learn anything further on this topic, you can always get to this database and check that. And this PowerPoint will also be given to Professor Debashis Sur because there are many students who are listening to this lecture for any further deliberation which you may want to have. So as per the OECD report, if you see the real GDP growth about the scenario till December 2019, the GDP annualized growth rate by the second quarter of 2019 in India was already almost 8. We were actually becoming a real global force and a key player in the global economy. This was because of some very good reforms, some very good policies. My audio is having a technical problem. May I continue? Okay. So the implementation of an ambitious set of reforms. Some of them again I have mentioned here. It's not possible to discuss all of them. GST replacing the myriad of indirect taxes. There are negative points of GST as well. Right now I only want to discuss the positive elements here. A leaner corporate income tax structure. This had already started way back in late 2018 or mid 2018s, and it was already showing some of its positive effects in the late quarters of 2019. The insolvency and bankruptcy code, speeding up reallocation of resources. This was a very positive reform considered by many industries. Now, electricity reached all villages, as per the report, reached all villages. I again highlight as per the report. And almost 100 million toilets have been built. So there has been a development in the overall health index. The overall consumption index will obviously have a positive effect in the overall health index increases, directly, indirectly. I mean, that's a different discussion altogether. But then all these had led to India becoming a key global economic power, or at least a key player in the global economy in 2019. However, India was not able to maintain this upward flow. Many a times we are always saying that the pandemic led to this crash, but it is not so in the case of most of the countries, especially India, because by the end of 2019, early 2020, we had already started seeing, mid-19s I would say, we had already started seeing a slowdown. Now, why? Why was the slowdown happening? The creation of quality jobs had not matched the number of newcomers in the labor market. So the number of people coming in were large, but we were not being able to give them their right fit. Quality jobs were not there, resulting in more than unemployment, underemployment. And of course, rising employment was already there. And here, women and youth are being affected most. Now, we already know, as Dr. Sur said, that in India, almost more than 60% of our population is in the age bracket of 20 to 35 years. It's a young country. Now, if in the young country, unemployment rises, underemployment rises, the overall economy is going to be pulled down in every possible angle. Then, nearly 90% of jobs are informal without job protection, a big problem in our country. You already have seen the number of layoffs that have happened during coronavirus crisis, the number of pay cuts which have happened. Most of our jobs are informal, in the informal sector, and without any job protection. Then, this is again, this inequality is going on, rising. We do not know how to capture that. Inequality in wealth, in access of public services remain wide. And as Sir said in his previous deliberation, the PDS, the public distribution system in everything has to be improved, not only in the financial sector, but in every sector. Otherwise, this inequality in wealth will keep on becoming larger, and it will keep on booming even more widely all over us. Now, pollution is always already a problem. This has led to a kind of health crisis which has escalated during the pandemic. Corporate investment as a share of GDP no longer declines but has failed to rebound. Construction has weakened. This, I would say, is a major problem. Construction has weakened despite large housing and infrastructure needs. We need a lot of infrastructure, but then the spending is very limited. Even if funds are allocated, they are not being spent properly. There is a huge amount of red tape involved. All these problems were already there before even the corona pandemic hits. So it's, I would say, very lopsided to say the present stock market or present global crash is because of coronavirus. Yes, coronavirus has activated it, but the reason is not coronavirus. The reason lies somewhere much deeper in a much more fundamental aspect of our. So, situation in the pandemic. The real GDP growth rate, if we consider all G20 countries, with the exception of China, will have suffered recession in 2020. And to think of coronavirus originated in China. Now, there is expected to be a fragile recovery by probably the end of 2021, but then it's highly unlikely given the second wave of the pandemic. Now, I have many figures here. I would just like to bring your attention to India. In 2019, from early 2019, when our real GDP growth rate was touching 8, it had already gone down to 4.2. During the pandemic, now it is hovering somewhere around negative of 10.2. In so many reds, there is only one green, China. And in 2021, it is expected to rise. expected, as I said, and I will talk about this when we discuss some market equivalence here. So the point is, this slowdown in our economy, the risks which we were facing were already there. They were somehow, coronavirus acted as a catalyst and increased those risks to a manifold degree. COVID-19 outbreak has ravaged the economy, we already know. I would like to discuss only one point here. In the absence of stability in the Indian stock market, the volume has decreased. The valuation had initially decreased to almost 1. It's starting to recover slowly. And most Indians are starting to invest outside. Now, drops in BSE sensitivity index is temporary, we already know, because every time there is a dip, ultimately it will recover. But then if we do a simple pre and post-COVID comparison, if you are taking only Nifty 50 and Sensex here, somewhere in 14th Jan, when the world was already in the grips of time, in the grips of the coronavirus pandemic, we were still at a nascent stage. This was the structure. 23rd March 2020. You already know the lockdown started from 5 p.m. on this day. See the difference in volume here. And just 1 month after that, there has been an increase. So it's extremely difficult to predict, and I will have some more statistics to share with you, to say that how this pandemic is actually influencing, impacting, or affecting our markets, especially the Indian market. So, if I consider the basic structure, ever since COVID-19 strike, markets have constantly moving under this uncertainty. And this, as I said, that it is very different from the global financial crisis of 2008. The market cap has already lost a certain amount, 27.31%, and it has reflected the sentiments upon investors, foreign and domestic alike. So everyone is trying to either come out, or initially they were trying to come out of their investments. Right now, the investments have plummeted so much, they're trying to hold on to it. Many speculators are already investing in those extremely expensive stocks which have become accessible now. They're not so expensive anymore. And there is a large amount of volatility which is there. People who have risk appetite, they are actually lapping up this volatility. However, it needs to be seen what are the industry-specific sectors, how are they actually taking up this entire global shock. A certain sectors we already know, hospitality, tourism, entertainment, have been affected even worse, and their stocks even below 2%. I'm skipping this slide. I'm going to this particular slide here. See, we already know that the RBI has been doing taking a lot of cuts to try and improve the liquidity. They're trying to infuse liquidity. They're trying to improve the distribution system. They're trying to improve the amount of stability in the market by various measures. To a certain extent, it is working. But then again, as I said, that until and unless the root cause is taken up and the root problem is settled, it's very difficult to work on band-aids. We need to diagnose the problem and solve that. So if I do a small market watch of PSU stocks, I have general stock and mutual funds. This is during the COVID crisis. So weak sentiments have led to attractive valuations in some PSU stocks are worthy. All these have been taken from Economic Times, and the date is 25th September. So if you see, there has been a fall in market in 5 years, 10 years. But then more than this, you look at the next slide. These PSU giants are worth buying now. This is based on when the valuation in the week of 20th to 25th September this year. See, NTPC, Coal India, Indian Oil, Hindustan Petroleum, these are becoming attractive. They are having a potential gain also being expected. Look at their market capitalization and their target price. So this pandemic is having a very, I would say, dichotomous effect on stock markets, where stock very volatile. Some PSU stocks are doing very well. Some PSU stocks have a huge amount of downward risk. And it's very difficult to time the market right now because no one knows what is the next thing which is going to happen. And as you know, all these are completely directly related to all the incentives the government is giving, the policies the government is coming up with, which is affecting the stock market either in a positive or a negative, depending on the risk. These are some of the actively managed PSU funds. They have been able to beat the segmental index. Imagine now beating a segmental index in this pandemic situation is a big thing, and some of them have actually been able to beat it. And as I said, it's extremely difficult to figure out the main reason why. I have taken this, might be a little hazy because I have taken this from the Wealth Insight magazine. Source is mentioned here and Economic Times. I want to bring your attention to this downward risk. See, as per this is again data as on 25th September. I have tried to put in the latest data because if the economy is going through a crisis, we need to understand how the stock markets are responding to this risk. So, the stocks of Cipla, NTPC we have discussed just before, but look at the downward risk. The downside risk is also very high. I would like to bring your attention to these two specific companies. Pharma, look at the downside risk of 2.88 and just below that, just one rank below, Jyoti Labs, 1.77. Now, this downside risk, I'm sure everyone knows what is it, but then what it indicates is more important in the present scenario. These entire set of stocks are reacting to the policies which are being done. They are absorbing the market shocks, be it a supply chain shock, be it a distribution system shock, be it an interest rate shock. They are absorbing it to a certain extent. But then the downside risk indicates that their ability to be able to absorb that shock in future. I will discuss few trends also, which are again, as I said, extremely dichotomous when we say that the economy is falling, but somehow the Nifty is doing well, Bankex is not doing well, so we will come to that in just a minute. I have a few more snapshots here. And as we say, this is ranked as per top 50 companies, and you can find the lower we go down, the downside risk in some companies are less, in some companies it's still very high. These are the snapshots of some fast-growing stocks. Dixon Technologies, PI Industries, Laurus Labs, Divi's Labs, Granules India. So two pharma companies, or famous pharma companies, I would say. Then least risky, Dr. Reddy's Lab, Hindustan Unilever, Marico, Cipla, Sanofi. So in all these things, you will find there is an indication of the pharma industry, and we already know one. Towards the end, we will discuss that for a bit. And top stocks with lowest price earning ratio, least expensive. NTPC, Power Grid, Tata Power, Grid built on Sun TV. So people are investing because they know that if they can hold on to this investment for 5 years, 10 years, it will generate huge returns. So there are speculators, there are risk takers, even moderate risk takers with some fund which they are ready to exploit or ready to kind of take risks with, are investing in these stocks, which is kind of giving an upward boost to the stock market. Now, it's very difficult to predict how long this will continue. Because as we said, right now we are almost in the middle of the first wave, and markets, to a certain extent, I cannot say are optimistic, but they're neither optimistic nor pessimistic. There are volatilities there, there's a large amount of volatility, but then some stocks are doing well and bringing in a certain amount of stability. If I look into the mutual fund scenario, I will only talk about a few stocks here because time is limited. Large caps actually are doing well. If you consider, this is taken from Value Research, Axis Mutual Fund, Canara Robeco, HDFC Index Fund, BNB Paribas, they are all rated funds. And they're actually not giving a very bad return. You see, a 3-month return is also showing positive. 3-month meaning, again, these are absolutely up to date. 25th September, I have taken these data. So even in a 3-month return period, during the pandemic, they have been able to hold on to this. 5-year, if you see, the 5-year return is less than the 3-month return. Yes, of course, there is an annualized calculation here. But still, if we consider, they have not been affected so badly as we thought. Equity large cap, this is a situation. Equity large and mid cap. Again, more or less same structure. This is the 3-month return. I will talk about multi-cap. I have taken each one of these sectors, and for further analysis, we can always have a discussion on this later. I would like to take up debt. If you take up medium to long-term debt, even then we do not see negative figures here. So these are your 3-month, 6-month, and these are taken during the pandemic. So the question here arises that if the risk factors that we already know, the risk which we had on risk factors of the financial sector, of the financial market in India, if that is to be linked with the present scenario of the stocks or mutual funds or the capital market or the market as such, then it is giving a very, I would say, very mixed picture. And this mixed picture may actually lead to somewhat of an optimistic scenario in the future. I would especially like to discuss few trends, some closing trends, because we already know the resistance and support levels will help us understand the behavioral pattern of, at least initial behavioral pattern of some of the markets. So if you consider, I'm going specifically talking about Sensex, Nifty and Nifty Banks. So if I consider Sensex here, you see the date of trend change was 17th July, mid of pandemic, and the trend was up. So it has already started going up. Nifty 50, more or less the same date, has again started going up. Trend is up in the middle of the pandemic. Nifty IT I'm not discussing, I'm discussing Nifty Bank. 30th March, it has started coming down and it has still not reversed. But now, how do we correlate this? Nifty and Nifty Bank, they're supposed to go at least in some similar direction. And the point that Nifty Bank started going down mid-March, that was a time when the pandemic hit us. Even after infusion of so much of liquidity, somehow the Nifty Bank has not been able to reverse the trend. It's still going down. What I feel, I mean, as per my opinion, as per my experience, these are happening because of the impact of the policy decisions that the government is making. And as Sir has said, and as both Dr. Sur and Dr. Mazumdar just said, the policy decisions, if not taken in a rational manner, looking into their ultimate reach, it will lead to a coalition of problems in such a way that it will bring down, it will pull down the entire economy. So the policy decisions taken by RBI, by the Government of India, by Ministry of Finance, by in general everyone, it has somehow helped in the trend change in Nifty and Sensex, but banks as a whole have not been able to recover the way they should have. The downward trend should have changed, but it hasn't. This is as on 25th September I'm talking about. March and September, there's a lot of gap. Nifty Bank is still not. Now if I take about BPCL, one of the stocks, as we said, that BPCL was one of the stocks which we could have bought, but it has already started showing the downward trend on 25th September. So that could be considered as a trend change on 25th September. Cipla, upward trend happened in 9th April and it's still going on. I will take ITC. Downward trend started till 24th September, it was going up. We were saying that it is helping, it's doing well, economy is going positive, the Sensex is somehow Sensex and Nifty improving. But on 25th September itself, if you see, there is a downward trend, and we do not know how much, this will plummet to. It's a huge rabbit hole, and we do not know what's going to happen once we enter that. If you see, Larsen and Toubro, again, September, downward trend. Till now it was going up. Maruti, 25th September, downward trend. NTPC, which was supposed to be a good stock to buy as per the PSU result, again it has started showing the downward trend from December. So these downward trends are, from September. These downward trends have already started happening, and NTPC and ONGC were supposed to be some of those PSU stocks which were actually doing well even during the pandemic. So, as I said, in this situation, traditional risk factors which are there need to be seen in a different light. The financial markets have various risks which are involved. But then right now, the situation is so dynamic that it is extremely difficult to project how one particular risk will affect the overall pandemic scenario. How will it affect the individual company, the Nifty, the Sensex, the Bankex, the Nifty Bank, etc. So we need to keep a very watchful eye, and especially before investing in any of these markets, be it a mutual fund, be it a derivative. I have a different analysis on derivatives, but as I said, due to the paucity of time, I would not want to go into that because that would require some long, lengthy derivation. So if I consider some of the specific users, I've taken a few snapshots. The pharmaceutical Cipla has received an approval from US FDA. So that is the reason why it's doing well. Same thing with Zydus Cadila, received because these are major exporters, major manufacturers of the drugs and exporters of drugs as well. So the moment they get a pharmaceutical company US FDA approval, obviously their stocks will increase. Engineering. RITES has been awarded a turnkey contract. So infrastructure would kind of have an impact because of this engineering project. GMR Infrastructure announced the signing of definitive agreements with GMR SEZ and Port Holdings. Havells India announced its entry into refrigerator segment under consumer durable brand. So this again helped in additionally providing more 25 models by devices. Production is increased. Thereby, expected stock will also increase. ONGC announced that the fire at the company's Zira gas processing has been extinguished and they're already beginning their normal operations. NTFC Finance, Nippon Life India Asset Management, has received a joint mandate to manage investments of Post Office Life Insurance Fund. This is a very large portfolio, and Rural Post Office Life Insurance Fund. So there are certain snapshots I have taken. As I said, it's not possible to discuss each and every element here, but then there are other the pandemic situation and the existing traditional risks that any financial sector, financial market will go through. We need to consider this pandemic as a special situation. Along with the existing traditional risk factors, we are also getting into an aspect where we need to be very mindful of the trends. And I think one of the examples I have taken here, Tata Consultancy Services and Yale University finally announced the launch of new training. Now, after all these, what do we learn? I mean, ultimately, we need to figure out some risk mitigation techniques. Now, the structural issues, as Sir has already discussed, I will not deliberate too much on it. The major problem is in the labor market. Unresolved balance sheet issues, average contribution to TFP. All these have led to major downward trends in the Indian economy as a whole. This, along with the pandemic situation, has led to an accelerated catalytic effect. So what should we do? Now, we already know the traditional risk mitigation techniques are there. So I'm not going to elaborate on them because we already know what are the traditional risk mitigation techniques which not only our government is following, RBI is trying to follow, the companies are trying to follow, but some generic suggestions. Financial institutions should acquire more detailed sector exposure. Why sector exposure? Because the pandemic is hitting each and every sector very differently. This is always for any crisis, but especially for this crisis, different sectors are being very different. So thereby, the sector exposure to capital risk should be taken as a priority in order to come up with solutions, because there cannot be one solution for all. It's one solution fits all is no more valid. You need to have very specific solutions which are specific industries to come easy. Banks and investors use an approach to capital valuation, because you see, they already have their traditional valuation systems, they have their own techniques, but it has to be appropriate as per the situation. So maybe one of the reasons why bank Nifty is not moving at all in the at least a similar direction of Nifty would be the marked difference of valuation, could be the base, how it is absorbing these shocks. Sector-specific capital considerations should also be overall analysis is fine. Sector-specific capital considerations should be included in the overall credit analysis of financial institutions. Banks trying to find out signification and supply chain, because we already know the pandemic has shown how vulnerable our global supply chain sectors are. The entire supply chain all over the world is extremely vulnerable. So if we try to find out the specific capital consideration of these operations in supply chain, how that will impact particular sector, probably the analysis will bring some more to the situation. And short-term gains are always there, but long-term inflation, because the key is in competition. We've already seen so many innovations which have come up, and to end my lecture, I will list a few of them. I hope I have 5 more minutes. So there are long-term candidates for some generic suggestions. So there are many more suggestions. But this, I feel, will help in the financial analysis to bring it out and as Sir has already said, that India has already become kind of a favorable destination for a lot of investment which is being done for China, because China has had a face loss. India already has inherent positive workforce, a cheaper workforce, a good English-speaking workforce, which will help in global communication, and general overall framework is already there. Actually, some notable change to talk about people who have already opened up to this pandemic and acted Institute of India, which is already paired up with Oxford University and AstraZeneca to manufacture the vaccine whenever it comes up. Paytm is seamlessly continuing its financial and e-commerce services during the crisis. So they have been change makers because they were very fast in doing their analysis and product innovation and coming up with solutions. Roofers in this pandemic situation, because because one grocery store, its overall daily orders have increased to 40% during the pandemic, because they have been able to wake up this essential commodity services and service sector. Lenovo India, seamless transition to the work from home model, and they are planning to continue it for the long run, even after the pandemic is completely stabilized. BS has been trading non-stop, but already shown in the volume of trading has been happening. HUL, coordination with government and local authorities to ensure redeploying of manpower. So to conclude my entire discussion here, we already know in the present situation, whatever risks that we are coming across, they are manifesting in a different way. The traditional risk models may not be as effective in the analysis and search as they were in previous crises. So the anxiety need to be looked into in a new light, and structural reforms need to be made. Structural reforms going from digitalization, infotech, supply chain, reach of the digital to the poorest of poor, the most rural extreme India, then obviously an advantage of public distribution system, maybe to a certain extent, a little bit of privatization to boost up the entire distribution system, the entire pace of the movement may help. But then, as I said, there is no one solution fit all here. It needs to be looked into with a very calm mind, with a very calculated guess, and it needs to be looked into very often, so that we are prepared for what is to happen a year later. To end my discussion here, I would just like to quote one of my favorite personalities. Nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. And now it is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. Marika. Thank you very much. And at the end, I would again like to thank the authorities of the Heritage College for giving me this opportunity to share space with the likes of Dr. Sur, Dr. Moderator, Ghosh, and of course, Principal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Soheli. Actually, you gave a brilliant lecture. It's really a brilliant lecture.
I hope I was able to maintain time. I was rushing in a little. I hope I was able to maintain time.
Yeah, no. Because of some connectivity problem, there was a difficulty in listening to your lecture. Okay, so I did not follow throughout, but from your PPT, what I have gathered, that you wanted to show in your lecture that the capital market, the risk, the type of risk is quite different from the traditional risk, and the pandemic as a special case, and you started with some of the particular aspects of business risk in case of India, and indicating the financial sector risks, indicating the say paucity of fund, then capital formation is poor, etc. And then you went on to India's position, and you indicated that before the pandemic period, there was a slowdown, and that slowdown was perhaps because of some structural factors, some structural causes, as well as because of some cyclical factors were responsible for that particular slowdown. And detailed analysis you have made with the example of some different types of say stocks in the stock market, even in the PSU sector, in mutual fund, everywhere you have say given example, and at the ultimate end you have made some generic suggestions indicating that at this situation it is very difficult to state that what type of exposure to capital risk should any company make, and you gave some snapshots of some of the companies from different sectors, and I think that you have used some use specific and input specific say differences in your analysis, and you have also indicated that some of the companies have gained while some are losers. And recently I want to add only one thing with your lecture, that there is a K type of recovery. K type, some companies are gainer and some others are losers. So the recovery possibility is just like a K type recovery. Okay, but in my recent research work, I want to add, I have added with that K type of recovery with a D type of recovery. For example, who are losing, they can also gain because of government policies, as Professor Sur has indicated already, that if government takes proper policy, then those who are losing can also rebound, and that a full from one vertical axis, you have that upward sloping straight line, that is the upward tranche of K, and the downward part of the K, that if that rebounds and that mix again with that upward line, it becomes a D, that just like Debashis. Okay, so it is the D type of recoveries. Thank you again very much for your excellent, brilliant lecture. So both of you, and I would now expect some of the questions from the listeners, some of the our teachers or students. Okay, Dipanjan.
May I ask you something?
Due to the shortage of time, we are only taking 2 questions for the day. So the first question I will ask Professor Nilotpal Mukherjee to come forward. Sir, please kindly, yes, kindly switch on your video and question, put up your question.
Yes, yes, sir. Actually, what I am thinking that we are always discussing about a post-COVID situation, and why we are not thinking about a pandemic-resistant business model. We are all familiar with the damages that made in the economy by this pandemic. But this type of pandemic may occur in future also. So this is the height to think about a business resistant, a pandemic resistant business model. Actually, I am interested in this matter because last Sunday I have read in the a article that is in labor intensive industries. In labor intensive industries, for the bakeries or such bidi making shromiks, this type of industries, they are not familiar with this digitization. And why not government is imposing some technique to reskill them to work under this type of pandemic situations. Only they are giving some general information in the TVs by making some informations available. But why not reshaping factories, on reshaping the workplace? Because most of the companies, India and also in China, they have started reskilling their employees to work in this situation. But India, as the small scale industry, is the backbone
Hello,
of
Mr.
our country.
Hello, Mr. Mukherjee.
Yes.
You must be specific. You must be very brief in your question.
My question is that how to build up a pandemic resistant business model to avoid these risk factors.
Okay.
Question to me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. This is your suggestion, but the genesis of the problem lies in big drastic fall in the personal consumption expenditure. First of all, we have to address this issue. We all know that GDP has 4 basic components: personal consumption expenditure, business investment, government spending, and net export. So in this abnormal situation, both import and export activities have reduced drastically. Even if we consider government spending, we find that the government is now paying salary only, and in many cases we find that salary has been cut and there is no new business investment. So obviously we can say that India's GDP will almost entirely depend on personal consumption expenditure in near future. So we have to address this issue first. Okay, and obviously your suggestion is good, but first of all we have to tackle this problem: how to increase demand, how to increase personal consumption expenditure. And in order to, definitely this is your suggestion is one of the points that which is to be addressed. But first of all, we have to address the issue associated with the problem of drastic fall in personal consumption expenditure. That is demand. We have to increase demand. Okay.
Sir, without income stability, how could you boost up the personal consumption expenditure? Income stability, because people are losing jobs.
Yes. This is the problem. So we have to address this issue. We have to address the issue associated with personal consumption. So in order to increase the personal consumption expenditure, in order to increase the demand, total demand, necessary steps are to be taken by the government. So this is the basic duty of the government to do so. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
I just want to add one thing, that in a dynamic business world, there is no model like say pandemic resistant business model, because the
Yes.
pandemic, that problem also mutates. So when you keep one say strategy to resist it, it will change itself. So in a dynamic business model, there is no model like resistant permanently. So it cannot resist.
Exactly.
Okay. Ah,
It can be done, it can be resisted within very few
yes, yes,
period of
yes,
time, but
yes,
not in
yes.
the long run.
Not
Not
in
in
the
the
long.
long run, it would not
Yes,
be possible.
yes, sir. Thank you, so Dipanjan. Any next question, Dipanjan?
Sir, sir, we don't have enough time to take the next question. Sorry, everyone. The time is up near about. I will call Professor Bias Banerjee for giving the vote of thanks.
Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I consider it a great privilege to propose the vote of thanks to all the dignitaries present here. On behalf of the Heritage College, I would like to thank our speakers, Professor Dr. Debashis Sur and Professor Dr. Soheli Ghose, for enlightening us with their motivational speech. I'm sure everyone present here is taking away a lot from the knowledge that they had shared.